Welcome back to this course on copyright and related rights law. In this week, we are looking to understand whether works can have copyright in it without satisfying the consideration of originality. Towards this effect, we will study two types of works: sound recordings and cinematograph films. In this week, we will also be discussing a very important stakeholder in copyright administration, copyright societies. Let us remember what we have done over the previous weeks. In the first 4 weeks, we discussed the subject matters of copyright, literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works. By now, having completed these 4 weeks, you are now very clear with what is the difference between these works and how to identify them when an expression is shown or given to you. In the 5th week, we understood the foundational requirement of originality and how it is applied in terms of subsistence of copyright. Let us then start this session with an exercise in which we will look at images and then identify the work and also consider whether such a work can be original. This first image, which shows a piano and which shows sheet music. What type of musical work is it? All of you are saying musical work. Can a musical work be original, and how will it be original? You are all saying that the composer would not just have to put in some effort, but he would have to show some amount of creativity in his expression. Similarly is the case with a book. What type of a work is a book? Literary work. In what manner can a literary work be considered original? The author must show that there is a minimal degree of creativity in his expression. What about this? It's a painting, it's an artistic work, and on similar considerations, how originality is applied for musical works and literary works, it would apply for paintings as well. What about this? A performance such as this can be based on a script, and as we had understood, this would constitute a dramatic work. What we have understood is that when we consider originality, the Indian Supreme Court is focusing on such an assessment to be done on the ground of skill and judgment. In saying so, the court states that a minimal degree of creativity must be present. But the caution that we have been considering is that creativity doesn't extend to novelty and non-obviousness, a consideration for grant of patents for inventions. We have seen in the 5th week, where we discussed originality, that originality must be seen firstly from the point of its origination. In other words, has there been an independence of creation? You would recall, independence of creation means simply that a work has not been copied from another work. But in terms of what this independent creation is, we know it to be an expression. In a performance such as this, based on a script, the content of that script which has been expressed is a dramatic work. Similarly, the content of a painting which has been expressed is an artistic work. Similar, the content that has been expressed in a book is a literary work. When I say the content that has been expressed, you must consider that the underlying idea is not something that can be copyrighted, but nevertheless, the expression itself is a medium. Writing, after all, is a medium of expression, and we had considered that when fixation is a requirement, writing can be one way in which a content can be expressed. There are other ways in which content can be expressed and fixed. Let us then consider whether sound recordings and cinematograph films are original. Are they? Can we consider sound recordings in the way we consider literary works? Can we consider cinematograph films in the way we consider artistic works? What you see in this image is a typical studio setting. What, according to you, are the works that are part of a sound recording? Let me clarify that question. We have had an earlier discussion in which we have stated that a sound recording may not contain any work. It could simply be a recording of some sound. But sound recordings can also incorporate works. And therefore, what works can be a part of a sound recording? Musical works can be a part of a sound recording. Literary works can be a part of the sound recording. How? When a singer sings, the singing not only provides the tune, which is the musical work, but also the lyrics which are being sung, and which is a literary work. So, a sound recording fixes these works and the manner in which these works interact with each other. Let us also consider cinematograph films. What works can be part of the cinematograph film? In the same manner as we discuss sound recordings, a cinematograph film, which is effectively a work of visual recording, need not have any underlying works. But just like a sound recording, which can incorporate musical works and literary works, a cinematograph film too can incorporate literary, dramatic, musical works, artistic works as well. Let us ask ourselves, these works which are present in a sound recording or in a cinematograph film, are these underlying works original? Take a moment and think about this. Underlying works, literary works, musical works, or dramatic works, artistic works, in order for these works to have copyright subsist in them independently, they must satisfy originality. And therefore, it would be possible for a sound recording to have multiple original works as a part of it. Same is the case with cinematograph films. Cinematograph films can have multiple original works as a part of the cinematograph film. Let us recall, how is a fact not original? When did we consider this? When an author expresses his thought, the thought might be related to an event or a fact or an idea. But these underlying considerations are not the domain of copyright at all. In fact, a fact is not original simply because the author is not the originator of that fact. An idea which could be novel and which could in fact be attributed to the author would also not be copyrighted simply because copyright protects expressions. But it is important for us to understand that whatever expression is being claimed by an author, the expression must have a point of origination, and that point of origination is the author. Please remember, we are talking about expressions. And having understood originality, we know that independence of creation isn't sufficient. Or in other words, that this expression is not copied from another isn't sufficient. There has to be a minimal level of creativity. But what is the expression in a sound recording? Is there an expression in the sound recording? If we understand a sound recording to be a recording of multiple different original works which are coming together, of course, in the form of performances of such works, can we not say that a sound recording is only a medium of fixation? And if it is just a medium of fixation, isn't it different from a creative expression? In other words, can we say that writing is a work, a writing which incorporates the literary work? Literary work for sure is a work, but is writing a work? Similarly, isn't sound recording a medium of fixation? If we understand sound recordings as mediums and cinematograph films as mediums, then their role is restricted to carrying the expression. Let us also consider the question of whose expression, if at all, is the Copyright Act considering such sound recording and cinematograph film to be of. If we look at the Indian Copyright Act, we see that under section 2D, it states that the author in relation to a cinematograph film or sound recording is the producer. Who is the producer? In section 2W, it says producer in relation to a cinematograph film or sound recording. A producer who takes initiative and responsibility for making the work. In a scenario where a cinematograph film is bringing different original works together, is facilitating such an arrangement. But it's not the arrangement itself which is in question. Had the arrangement itself been a question, then we are probably considering a compilation of scenes or a compilation of protectable expressions or unprotectable expressions, which we have clearly understood is a literary work. Then what exactly is a sound recording and a cinematograph film if not just a medium of expression? Let us look at Section 13 of the Copyright Act. Under this provision, it is very clearly provided that the works in which copyright will subsist would be, you can see, original literary, dramatic, musical and artistic works, cinematograph films and sound recordings. Section 13, which talks about subsistence of copyrights and what must be the considerations in making that determination, does not apply original to cinematograph films and sound recordings. This understanding of cinematograph films and sound recordings as carriers of expressions and as a mode of fixation effectively places the copyrightability question rather on the content and the underlying works with respect to originality and not with respect to cinematograph films and sound recordings. But this doesn't mean that cinematograph films and sound recordings don't have a copyright, as it is very clear from Section 13. Both of these are subject matters on which copyright will subsist. The only point here is that we do not need to be considering originality in order to be considering grant of copyright. Therefore, if a question were to arise as to subsistence of copyright in a cinematograph film or in a sound recording, then we do not need to apply the originality test for the sound recording and the cinematograph film by itself. Let us also consider, now that we have understood that there are underlying works which sound recordings can carry and cinematograph films can carry, and these underlying works are original works. And if cinematograph films and sound recordings is a form of fixation, then shouldn't that be a copyright of the original authors? We can see in Section 14 that to be the case. You can see in Section 14 it is stated, for the purposes of this Act, copyright means the exclusive right subject to the provisions of this Act to do or authorize the doing of any of the following acts in respect of a work or any substantial part thereof. In the case of literary, dramatic and musical works, it says, you can see, to make any cinematograph film or sound recording in respect of that work. Similar is the provision with respect to artistic works. Therefore, we clearly see that as forms of fixation, as carriers of expression, the underlying works, which are literary works, dramatic works, musical works and artistic works, they would have to satisfy originality, but that is not a requirement for cinematograph films and sound recordings. We also understood that despite not needing to satisfy originality, these are subject matters of copyright and have their respective provisions which grant them respective copyrights. So in the same provision in Section 14, in which these underlying works are granted copyrights, the cinematograph film and sound recording is also granted copyrights. In other words, the cinematograph film and the sound recording as a subject matter is a separate subject matter from the underlying works which can subsist in such film or such a recording. One question that must have come to your minds is, what is the role of the director in the creation of a film? How is it that the director is not considered as the author? You can see in section 2D, the author in relation to a cinematograph film is the producer. It doesn't say anything about a director being the author, and which can be confusing because whenever we consider cinematograph films for the kind of expressive effort that a director must put in, it is confusing why the director is not considered as an author. And therefore, in the next session, we will see what is the justification for considering subsistence of copyright in a cinematograph film or a sound recording with the producer and the non-consideration of directors. Thank you for joining me. See you all in the next session. Thank you.